there were the two main characters, Mary Lou Farrell and Silverberg, who we were married in late that 55. I was a young ensign in the U.S. Civil Engineer Corps. My friend Donald Valentine was the senior at Fordham University studying courses about Hemingway, and Professor Bob Brown at Fordham University was teaching courses about Hemingway. Those are the main characters, and then there was Ernest Hemingway. I was on a training mission with the Amphibious Construction Battalion, and we were making a liberty stop in Havana, Cuba, in late January of 1955. Mary Lou, who was my study girlfriend at the time, was a second-year student at City College of New York, and then she arranged a trip so we could meet in Havana. She went a week or 10 days earlier and stayed at beautiful Veradero Beach, which was outside of Havana, with some other students. And before she left, as a friendly joke with my friend Donald Valentine, she bet him that she would have Ernest Hemingway sign her book, which was The Farewell to Arms, which you have. Well, Mary Lou and I met in Havana for a weekend. We went to the Floridita, the famous Floridita, for daiquiris, and we had dinner. And the sidekick here was that she wore black slacks, like toreador slacks, and it was very unusual for women to wear pants, so to speak, in Cuba. Then we went to Varadero the next day, and then my ship left on Sunday late afternoon. A day or so later, Mary Lou telephoned Ernest Hemingway. When he answered, she went through, I think, the servant first, and he got on the phone. Basically, she introduced herself quickly as, I have a friend at Fordham University. She was just meaning Donald Valentine. But Hemingway immediately assumed that she was a friend of Professor Bob Brown, who had been in touch with Hemingway on many occasions. Bob Brown was writing a book or articles about Hemingway. So Hemingway, he asked her, he actually said, my wife is away, and I have to entertain people who were coming from the French ambassador, French embassy, and he asked her if she would come and help him entertain. So he sent his driver to pick her up, and then it was an afternoon session there, and I think the funny thing was that the ambassador said she looked familiar, and that he had seen her at the Floridita with a naval officer, which was true. We were there. So the funny thing was that he said she stood out because she wore pants. And then, they spent the afternoon there, and then the ambassador and his group drove her back to where she was staying in Havana. A day or so later, Hemingway invited her back. I think they made that arrangement before she left after the first meeting. But at any rate, Hemingway invited her back for lunch, and he sent his driver to pick her up. As I recall, Mary Lou said they spent the afternoon talking, and Hemingway showed her around his property. He had many animals, dogs and cats and things like that. When Hemingway asked her about how Professor Brown was, well, she replied, well, who's Professor Brown? Not knowing that it was Donald's professor at Fordham. And she said, I only know Donald Valentine, one of his students. So apparently that was a big joke, and Hemingway laughed and told her, oh, you tricked me, and, that was a big trick, and you got a kick out of it. Well, she didn't mean to trick him, but basically, before she could finish her sentence, he assumed that she was Professor Brown's friend or something. Well, at any rate, she had arrived earlier to Cuba, so was at Veradero Beach, really beautiful place. And she was, had a deep tan, and she had like dark brown hair. So Hemingway called her the Black Kraut because apparently she had told him that her parents had immigrated from Germany. And Hemingway also said that he called his best friend or good friend, Marlene Dietrich, the German actress, the Kraut, so that Mary Lou would be the black Kraut. And so that was, he drove, the driver drove her back to Havana.
Were you disappointed you didn't get to meet him?
Oh, of course. Well, you see, I only had a short stay there. And, it was kind of a joke. I know she kept saying, well, I'm going to call Hemingway. I'm going to call Hemingway when we were together. And I know, yeah, sure, we joked about it. I never thought she would do it, But, she was outgoing and very personable. And, she just took a chance at calling the house,
Remarkable that back then you could pick up the phone and call and go see a man like Hemingway.
That's true. I mean, things were so much different then. Don't forget, that was before Castro. Baptiste was still in charge of Cuba, and it was a whole different place. A lot of nightclubs. We went to the Hotel Nacional, which was the famous hotel. And as I said, the Floridita was the place to go for daiquiris. And then we went to some other nightclub I can't remember. I think she did make an impression on him because she's a very attractive young woman and very outgoing. She could carry on conversations with people, quite extensively. She's pretty smart. As far as my wife, she was an avid photographer. She had all these cameras, and she would, wherever she went, she took a lot of pictures and bird watching. And then she traveled a lot, she would go with these trips, the elder hostels and so on, to Australia and England and Alaska, and, she even went to Africa on a safari with some group, she would love to do all that stuff, take all these photos. I didn't go because I was too busy at work. I was one of these characters who devoted my life to my work, I said, I'm not going to go for 2 weeks. I'm busy doing this. I'm writing something. I've got meetings, that kind of stuff. So,
well, she sounds like quite a free spirit.
Yes, I mean that was it. She was a really a free spirit. Not really afraid of going somewhere. Going to Cuba in those days was not an easy trip. Yeah, I was in the Navy. I enlisted in the Navy when I graduated from college. It was in July of '53, and then I went off to candidate school, and I was commissioned in September of 1953. I was ensign, and I was in the Civil Engineer Corps of the United States Navy because I had a degree in civil engineering. And the feather in my cap, they only took 28 on a national search for this enlistment, and so I went through many interviews before I was selected. So that was, I think, something I was proud of, and then I was assigned to the amphibious Seabee Battalion. It was in Little Creek, Virginia, and we worked a lot with the Marines, take Marine people around and practice landing on beaches and things. So when I was in the trip to Cuba, we were on so-called maneuvers, training mission in the Caribbean. And then they had a sort of a weekend off for liberty, that kind of stuff. So that's how I wound up there.
When Hemingway died, did you have a conversation do you recall that coming up with your wife?
Oh, of course, because my wife collected, magazines, and whenever there was something written about Hemingway in Life magazine or Time magazine, she collected those issues. I think I showed you one of them, that one Life magazine issue where he was writing about the bullfights. He returned again to write about bullfights later in his life, and it led to a book he wrote later in his life about the bullfighters. That issue I showed you, this picture was on the cover.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that was one of the things we had. I had other things here. I lost some of them when my house was flooded in the hurricane in Long Beach, that was 10 years ago, because I had some stuff downstairs, and that was all flooded. But luckily I had the letters were upstairs in the almost in the attic, they were hidden in the closet, so they never got wet.